All right, this is a meeting of the Metropolitan Area Planning Agency Board of Directors, and it will be conducted in compliance with the Nebraska statutes of the Open Meetings Act. For reference, the Open Meeting Act is posted on the west wall of the boardroom. Agenda item A is the roll call. Liz, we'll start with that.
Supervisor Scott Belt,
Here.
Commissioner Angie Burmeister here. Commissioner Roger Garcia. Mayor Rusty Height,
Here.
Mayor Doug Hindig,
Here.
Councilmember Don Rowe,
Here.
Mayor Gene Stothert, Jacqueline Morrison, Supervisor Carol Vinton here, Mayor Matt Walsh.
Thank you, Liz. Item B is approval. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Second. Any questions or discussion? Liz?
Belt,
Aye.
Burmeister,
Yes.
Height,
Yes.
Rowe,
Yes.
Morrison,
Yes.
Vinton, yes, Hindig.
Yes. Item C, I need a motion to approve the board minutes from the April 25-24 meeting. So move type. Second. Further discussion or questions? Liz?
Belt,
Aye.
Burmeister,
Yes.
Height,
Yes.
Rowe,
Yes.
Morrison,
Yes.
Vinton,
Yes.
Walsh, or Kindig.
Yes. Item D is our reports and presentations. We'll start with Mike.
Okay. Pull this up here. So the executive director report for May, Christine, if you want to go to the next slide. Well, actually, I can go to the next slide. So obviously, you know, top of mind for us here at MAPA are obviously the tornadoes and disasters that have been occurring here across the region. So this is the two tornado events in late April and early May and their impact on the MAPA region. Obviously, a tremendous amount of damage to communities across the region, and we've been in contact with the emergency management staff. We were at a Pot County recovery meeting this morning as well, just to really understand what role MAPA can help in supporting the communities on the way forward. You know, on one side of things, a significant amount of funding becomes available after disasters. Some of that flows through the Economic Development Administration after Congress takes action. And so with that, we'll be keeping our eye on that here to come. But really, our MAPA, on behalf of MAPA staff, you know, any support that we can provide to communities in recovery. We know that, you know, hundreds of housing units impacted, hundreds destroyed across the region here over the last couple of months, or the last month, as it were. On a sort of a similar vein from the 2019 floods, Iowa Economic Development Administration notified us earlier this month, and we had a conversation with them last month about some funding that's becoming available from some de-obligations of projects from 2019. What's new about this is that previously, the most impacted counties and communities in Southwest Iowa were Fremont and Mills counties. Because so many of the displaced people from Mills and Fremont County ended up in Pottawatomie County, communities in Pottawatomie County are now eligible for this competing of those funds. And so it's about $31 million worth of funding for single-family for-sale housing to low to moderate income families. For this, you know, there's kind of a sweet spot here of about 7 units or fewer to where Davis-Bacon doesn't apply to the use of the federal funding, and you can get a little bit more value bang for your buck. And so we've been working with some of the communities. I know Council Bluffs has had a briefing on this too from IEDA, and we're hoping to ensure that, you know, a significant portion of this, if not all of it, can be spent in Pottawatomie and Mills counties. Fremont County is obviously eligible as well, but a significant number of subrecipients in Fremont County in rounds 1 and 2 who are not going to be eligible this go around. So it's kind of new communities to the table as well. So more to come on that. I think this is open through the end of September. One thing to give an update on, we provided some updates on our Charlotte Learning Site visit. So we went to Charlotte, North Carolina earlier this month, had 20 attendees, including 5 staff, and you can see some of the topics covered there, but really kind of a broad cross-sectoral group. We view these as leadership exchanges, really trying to, you know, build not only understanding of another community, but build some of those relationships across sectors, across communities within the region as well. And so tremendously successful, great feedback from the people who have participated in this year's, and many thanks to Laura and Christina who did a yeoman's work to get this over the finish line. And Councilman Rowe actually attended here from the MAPA board. I don't know if you have any thoughts about the site visit.
Yeah, I would be glad to talk about it. Been on 2 of these. This is my 2nd trip, and these things are so beneficial. And thanks to Liz and Laura and Grant, Carlos, and Sue got to know the MAPA staff a little bit better, which is always a good thing. And making connections and building relationships between the different groups is always good and it's always fun. But the thing that we take away is all of the things that Omaha's doing great. You know, we may be 20 years behind Charlotte, but we're going that way. And I think it's, you know, due to the work that's being done here and throughout the city and county. And those trips are really worth the dollars spent. And I just want to say thanks to Laura and Liz for keeping it so organized, for Grant keeping me.
I didn't do anything.
Yeah, out of the street.
Yeah.
I
get rid of the sidewalk.
If you get a chance, take your walking shoes, but it's well worth it. So thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely, thank you. So a couple of other updates on regional initiatives. We've been in talks with the Greater Omaha Chamber of Commerce about a funding source through the Office of Local Defense Community Cooperation. This office funded the joint land use study that MAPA led back in 2017 and 2018 to really harmonize land use regulations across the region to support current and future missions at Offutt Air Force Base. The Chamber and Offutt leadership are pursuing a funding request for an additional study to look at even a broader set of kind of community priorities, military installation resilience, kind of focusing on, you know, the recovery from the 2019 floods, transportation infrastructure, housing in the community, and really building on a lot of conversations that leaders around this table have been really a big part of. So if that request is successful, it's anticipated that MAPA will again kind of lead and administer that funding, but obviously it's a broad regional study and we're looking forward to more on that. But we just learned that that request is going in this summer. So more to come probably next calendar year, but I wanted to provide an update on that front. On the other side of things, on transportation, there's a meeting going on right now actually with Director Kramer from the Nebraska Department of Transportation, the Greater Omaha Chamber of Commerce and other MAPA staff about kind of the continuation of this Connect Go partnership. Again, if you recall back from August of last year, Director Kramer coming to this board, talking about kind of these bold transformative projects, organizing resources at the state and at the regional level to help accelerate towards that. Kind of a continuation of that here today in partnership with the city of Omaha and really trying to understand where some of those projects are. But again, back to the grant application we submitted last month through the board of directors, kind of continuing and deepening that partnership with the state and trying to make sure that our regional priorities remain state priorities as well. And then finally, the Council of Officials meeting in June is going to be held at the Strategic Air and Space Museum. That's what it was called before, Strategic Air Command and Aerospace Museum. And Clayton Anderson, the Astroclay, the Nebraska astronaut, he's the executive director there at the SAC Museum, but he's also going to be our keynote speaker, talking a little bit about what the museum does to inspire the next generation of workforce in STEM fields, and also about, you know, a little bit about the history of both the region and the nation that's honored at the SAC Museum. So it should be a pretty dynamic event, great venue. You get to sit underneath the SR-71. We'll be in the auditorium for the actual keynote address. So come on out and join us in Cass County next month.
Thank you.
It is at 11:30.
Well, I actually have the agenda pulled up. 11, so we're gonna do registration lunch starting at 11 a.m. So we'll have lunch in the lower atrium, and then we'll move into the theater for the call to order. So just because of the logistics of the space, we'll have lunch prior to the meeting actually being called to order.
So it starts at 11.
Yes, yeah. And then we'll have a tour after if anyone would like to attend. And there's a QR code right there if you want to register.
Very good. We can send it out to the board of directors after the meeting too. We have an email invite that might be more convenient. Okay.
Very good. I'll move on to Charlie. Do you have a report?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been doing here for our interns over the last several years is having one of their culminating experiences be kind of a presentation to the board about their experience as an intern at MAPA. And so Charlie is our latest intern who has elected not to stay on with us, but he's pursuing some new career opportunities. I'm sure he'll be talking a little bit about those and his experience as an intern with MAPA.
Yes, hello. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Charlie Harrington. I'm the Communications and Outreach intern. I started last May, and I'm gonna get to my presentation. So I am a Creighton 2023 journalism graduate on the news track, and then I started my internship here after I graduated. I graduated a little early. I graduated a year early, so I wanted some experience after my 3 years at Creighton to become a fully fledged human before I went into the professional workforce. And so I think this experience at MAPA has been really beneficial for me in the past year. I also have previous experience at Metropolitan Utilities District and as a summer intern as their communications intern. So I had a little bit of communications in the public sector experience in that way. And then I'm also the former editor-in-chief of the Creightonian and the Creighton Student Newspaper, and I also held a couple other positions like their opinion editor and their social media and online editor, where I started like their newsletter and their online e-newspaper. So a couple of good experiences there. And now I'm at MAPA. Also shameless self-plug here. Here's my digital portfolio if you want to see all my work from MAPA, from MUD, and from Creighton, and a couple freelance things I've done recently as well. I know this is kind of like a culmination of what my internship has been, so I'm going to start with what's next. And my plan had always been to move to Chicago in August, and so that leaves kind of an odd gap for the summer. But I'm also assessing a few options here in Omaha this summer. So I just kind of sent my resume to the Omaha Land Bank, a couple of different things as well. And so looking for anything, open to everything. So that's kind of what's next for me. So because I'm a journalism major, I'm going to do the 5 W's of my MAPA experience, my why, when, where, what, and who. So we're going to start with my why I chose MAPA. In the short term, I was really passionate about the greater Omaha metro area, and my experience in the public sector for MUD really exacerbated that. And so I really wanted to gain valuable experience in the year after my early graduation as well. And I wanted to do something that I was passionate about, and MAPA really aligned with that, and I really aligned with MAPA's mission. I was also really happy to see the networking opportunities, meeting people like you guys on the board, and MAPA's influential shareholders is really, really a great resource for me. So that was a little bit of my why for MAPA. Who did I meet while I was MAPA's intern? I met so many people, and it was so great to meet all of these wonderful people. Especially the people in Heartland 2050. A lot of the support that I gave to my team was with these Heartland 2050 meetings, and I got to meet so many influential people and it was great to be able to shake their hand and introduce myself. And I also was able to plan the December social event, if any of you went to that, for our Heartland 2050 committees, I should say. And that was a really great experience, not only for me to kind of exercise my planning muscles, but also to meet people from all of the committees at Heartland 2050. I was also able to go to 3 council of officials this year, went to 2 quarterlies and 1 annual, and then I also went to the Valley Town Hall. And these events were places that I got to meet people that I never thought I would meet. Like I got to sit with the mayor of Gretna at our annual council of officials at dinner. That was such a cool experience. And at the Valley Town Hall, I was also really able to see MAPA's work in action and the concrete ways that they help communities, and the way that they had a survey for the city of Valley, and they got to really receive what the city of Valley wants to see in their community. And I thought that was really, really a great way to see what MAPA does as one of the first events that I went to as an intern. What did you pay me for while I was here at MAPA? I did a couple things. One of my biggest accomplishments and one of the things that I was probably most proud of was the mobility resource guide that I worked on with Jody and Travis. It was a great way to kind of gather all of the great transportation resources that we have here in our region, learn about them on my end, and then also see maybe where we can grow and expand, which we're doing every day here at MAPA. And also just how the different transportation things that we do offer are maybe not known about as much. So some of the great paratransit services that we have that I didn't know about, and hopefully people know a little bit more about now with this mobility resource guide. Also like the 211, I didn't know anything about that, so I got to learn about that as well. So that was a great project that I got to work on. I also worked on those regional equitable growth profile graphs down there. I did about like 60 of those when I started. So that was a fun project, kind of a more technical project. One of the other things I'm most proud of is our Instagram. When I joined MAPA's team, we had 130 followers, and now we have 251 followers, I just checked. And a lot of that is from the reels that I've done, and the reels are really how people find you on Instagram if you don't know, and so they should find you through the reels and then stay for the posts. And so I've done a lot of reels for MAPA, and if you don't follow us, please go follow us on all of our social media platforms. So that was really a really fun way for me to get involved in MAPA's work, and then also use MAPA's work to kind of view it through a new lens, and maybe a more fun lens, more vibrant lens, and kind of take away maybe all the technical jargon and kind of strip it down to what does the public want to know about MAPA. And so it was a really great way to be accessible, I guess. I also did countless posts on all our other social media platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, and really grew in my graphics skills, which is something that I didn't think I was going to grow in as much as I did. I came in as a writer because I was a news major, and so I grew in that as well, but I really grew in my graphics skills as well, and now I feel very confident to be able to go out and do more of that. I also worked with Owen on our bike map tutorial. We have a great resource in our bike map on our website, and some people might not know how to use it or that it's even there. So I made a YouTube video with Owen, and we made a tutorial for our bike map. I don't know if we can play like a little clip of that. Oh. No? Okay. Never mind. Good. And finally, where did I go? I went to a lot of rural communities with my Instagram reels, and I went to places like Malvern and Silver City, and Glenwood, and all these other great towns that maybe we don't focus on as much in our social media. So that's kind of what I did, and I would love to take questions if you have them.
Charlie, kudos to you. We have always known this is one of our weakness that we have. People will come up and say, what is MAPA? You know, it's the communication. So thank you for trying to enlighten a lot of people of what we do and who we are, because it just stuns people that they say, wait, you gotta backtrack again.
Yes, absolutely.
And thank you for coming into Mills County. I hope you were impressed.
I was very impressed, yes.
Good.
It was great to explore all those different smaller towns.
Good. Thank you for everything you've done.
Thank you guys.
I'll echo what Carol says. We appreciate everything that you did, and we wish you well in the future. You did call out Mayor Evans and Gretna special, but I'm gonna go.
I did notice that.
You know, maybe there's a reference, keep that in mind. But other than that, I hope you have a great summer and safe travels and successful career in Chicago.
Thank you so much. I
You bet.
appreciate you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Charlie.
Thank you.
Winter clothes.
Yeah.
Well, Omaha can give you a little bit of taste of that though, Scott,
A
so.
lot more up there.
So, item 2 under reports is we actually have a staff recognition. I'm gonna go ahead and let Mike do this at first and maybe highlight a couple of the things that he
Sure.
specifically has worked on, that type of thing.
Yeah, well, many thanks to Ryan, who's celebrating his 5th year here with MAPA this month. And so Ryan is on our community and economic development team, and he leads a lot of our EDA funded efforts and grant applications, a lot of the CDBG grants, and just really just one of those people that when we have community assistance requests, he's one of the first people that we send out to respond and really kind of help on the grant side of things. And so tremendous thanks to that, particularly here on the 5210 project in Council Bluffs most recently, and really a great effort. So thank you, Ryan, for 5 years of dedicated service to MAPA, and we'll recognize you here after the meeting. We'll grab a photo, and thank you very much.
Yep. Thanks, Ryan, appreciate it.
You need to say a speech now.
Yeah, you're welcome
God.
Well, I will say it's been a pleasure serving the communities and actually being able to see fruits of work and not just, filing paperwork. I originally went to school to be an accountant, and I think I'm doing way more rewarding, at least for me personally, Felix. So it's been a pleasure. Look forward to the work we continue to do.
Excellent, thank you. Item E, public comments. I don't think, Liz, that we had anybody request.
No.
And not seeing anyone, I'll move on. If I can get a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second, Bell.
Is there any discussion or questions by council? If not, Liz?
Belt,
Aye.
Burmeister,
Yes.
Friend,
Yes.
Height,
Yes.
Rowe,
Yes.
Morrison,
Yes.
Benton,
Yes.
Hindig.
Yes. Under item G, old business, item number 1 is a resolution for 2024 through 2020 updated urban area boundary court.
Yeah, well. So this item was actually brought in August of 2023, so last August. Basically, we approved urban area boundary changes and we submitted those to FHWA and the state DOTs for review. Iowa DOT came back with some minor changes and we made those adjustments, and now we're taking it through for a final approval. I don't think really anything is, yeah, it's not very different than what you saw last August. It's just kind of a formality, sending it through the DOTs and then having to come back and give our final stamp.
Any questions, of course? Any further discussion? If not, did I get a motion on that, Liz? I need a motion to approve. Someone like
Second.
Liz?
Belt,
Aye.
Burmeister,
Yes.
Friend,
Yes.
Height, Rowe,
Yes.
Morrison,
Yes.
Benton,
Yes.
Hindig.
Yes. Item H is new business. Item 1 is election of officers. Mike?
Yes, so we'll be looking for nominations for our chair and vice chair, which are currently held by Mayor Kindig and Supervisor Vinton, respectively. They have both indicated that they are willing to continue in their positions, so if that helps inform nominations from the floor. We're happy to accept those, but we will need to take action on the recommendation by this.
I also said I would be happy to vote for anyone else, Mike, so if anybody else would like to have the honor or the pleasure of doing this, that's absolutely fine with me also.
Nominations. Latest.
Do we have a motion for the slate before we seek the nomination?
Do we need that? Probably.
Probably. Probably need the nominations before we.
Make that part of the motion.
And agreed on the second. Second. And that's okay. Any further questions or discussion? Liz?
All right, Belt, Burmeister,
Yes.
Friend,
Yes.
Height,
Yes.
Rowe,
Yes.
Morrison,
Yeah.
Benton,
Yes.
Hindig.
Yes.
Yes, we could have done the people.
That's true. Always an option.
Thank you to. Yeah.
Mike makes it pretty easy, guys.
Sure does.
You've been, a warrior.
I've been
A warrior.
Well, it is kind of, and I am proud of it because Mayor Anderson served for
Long time.
13, 14, 15 years. And then I jumped on the board when he got off and then, lucky enough that you guys elected me. So it is kind of a neat thing that, I don't know, but this is kind of.
You gotta be.
I was council officials for the longest time. And then I suppose it's been 4 years doing this, maybe.
This will start
It was
Since
after
Rita.
Rita.
I think
I
so.
think this will start it there. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so we've been around, but everybody's kind of, MAPA's getting, we got some history. And we've got a lot of longtime serving officials, which speaks well for everybody of, I think, the job we're doing. So, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Item 2, benefit renewals, Christina.
Good afternoon. So I am bringing our benefit renewals to you all for approval today. I will start with our group health insurance. As you all may recall, back in September, we made a switch to move to NACO in their pool. They're doing a lot of really great things to keep our rates low, and so we really appreciate all the work they do. We had anticipated around a 5% premium increase for health insurance, and it actually came back at 3.5%. So we're very pleased with that. And then MAPA as a subgroup, we're doing very well, and so we're actually coming in at a 0.7 rate, so we're coming in below their standard rate at 1.0, and their average increase that they saw was approximately 6.5%. So we came in quite a bit lower, so that's great. There are no plan changes to our health insurance, so we are recommending that we continue on the plan that we are currently enrolled in. For our dental insurance, we are recommending a change here, and we do take this to our internal benefits committee just for reference. We have an internal staff committee that reviews all of these options, and then we take those to our finance committee. So the finance committee has already seen these as well. For dental insurance, we're previously with Principal Insurance, and they did bring us a renewal for a 4.5% rate increase with the same plan. However, we were able to evaluate some additional options through HICO and through Blue Cross Blue Shield, and they have a Signature Blue plan that is very favorable. As far as the benefit itself, there's an increase to the maximum benefit for each person. So the rates came in a little different. Instead of just a straight increase across the group, there are different increases spread amongst the coverage types. But overall, the average rate is coming in at 7.65, or reduced by 7.65%. So we'll actually be saving a little bit. We weighted that based on the enrollment and the coverage types. As you can see, the rates for our employee only and our employee plus family came down considerably. For employee plus spouse, employee plus child, those rates came in a little bit higher, but as far as our actual enrollments, the impact is low. And as you all may know, MAPA actually picks up, for employee only, MAPA picks up 93% of that premium. For employee plus spouse, child, or family, MAPA picks up 85%. So the impact to the employee and their paycheck is actually still quite low. You can see there in the white column in the bottom table, the changes to employee premium are still low. So we are recommending, the finance committee also approved a recommendation to move to the Signature Blue Premier 3 plan with Blue Cross Blue Shield Nebraska for our dental coverage. For long-term disability, we're with Principal currently, and they came back with initially a 19% premium increase. That was negotiated down to 9.5%. Commissioner Burmeister, I know you'd asked at our finance committee meeting, what was the explanation there for that increase? So I actually went back to Principal. You'll see it's still reflected as a 9.5% premium increase on our agenda. However, late yesterday afternoon, I heard back from Principal, and they have agreed to come down to 4.67% on our increase. So there, I was unable to amend the agenda just because we were within 24 hours, but we're actually only going to see a 4.67% premium increase on our long-term disability. For our vision insurance, we are with IMED, and we have a rate hold with IMED through June 30, 2025. So those rates will hold steady, and there's no change to our plan for that. And then our life insurance and AD&D also with Principal, no increase to premiums there. We have a rate hold as well there. So I'm happy to take any questions on those.
Any questions or discussion? If not, I would ask for a motion to approve with the noted change of a 4.67 increase instead of the 9.5 on the long-term disability.
Just one question, the agenda doesn't note that that's an action item, so do we have to take action on it?
Oh,
The agenda, Just wondering if the agenda's the issue.
My bad, is that after Christine, or will that come back, or is that just?
This is final, yes, I apologize, that's a typo on the agenda, this is an action item, yes,
It is an action item.
yes.
And it's also for, it's in the budget for next year already, right?
It is reflected in the budget documents that are farther down on the agenda. Yep.
So Matt and I have been working together as these premiums, and these renewal options have come in, and, so he should have all of this reflected, to match what we have here, here for your approval.
Any other questions for Christina? Can I have a motion to approve that?
I second that.
If there's no further discussion. Liz?
Belt,
I,
Burmeister,
Yes.
Brent,
yes.
Height,
Yes.
Rowe,
Yes.
Morrison,
Yes.
Benton,
Yes.
Walsh, or Kennedy.
And promote me to the mayor and council bluffs there. Liz.
Well,
No.
throws me off to not here.
I know it usually is, so that's all right. Item 3, action under new contracts. I'm gonna take all 3 of these under one vote unless someone requests that they can be pulled off. We'll start with, A, the 5310 transportation subrecipient agreements. Ford, you're up for a few of these, sir.
Yep, I'm all three of them, I believe.
Might as well pull up a chair, right?
That's right. Can I have one of yours? So for the two 5310 contracts, these are funds that were awarded under a previous call for projects. This would have been a few years ago, and the funding is now available, and we have it programmed through the Federal Transit Administration. There's a few agencies receive awards like this. City of Council Bluffs has been a kind of historic utilizer of these 5310 contract funds. They use it for their specialized transportation service. And then the Eastern Nebraska Community Action Partnership, NCAP. This will be the first time that we've contracted with them for these funds. They were awarded funds in, I want to say it was 2019, and it was just kind of a later year award. I believe it was with 2023 funds. We've got those funds in through the FTA. Basically, it'll be helping them to provide paratransit service primarily in North Omaha. Contract for service provision throughout Council Bluffs and then NCAPs in North Omaha. Questions about the 5310 contract?
If there isn't.
I do have a caveat just for your consideration. So these 2 agreements had to be altered slightly. We use a template. So we don't typically send them to legal because they've already been approved, but we did have a couple changes due to our annual audit, which specifically addressed the 5310 subrecipients. And so I changed that language, but I'm no lawyer. So we'll send that to legal to make sure that the language covers us as intended. So they just still need to go to legal. Other than that, they're ready to go. Federal amount.
At the finance committee, when we took these 2 agreements, we actually only had the federal amount listed, so it did not include the match. So I just wanted to mention that. What we took to finance committee was
Right.
the federal, so here we're bringing the full amount of the contract, the
Yep.
federal plus the match.
It's a 50-50 share. So we just had the federal amount. We didn't show the full amount of the agreement.
And this is the full amount.
Yes.
That's listed here.
Yep.
So, I'm gonna take a motion on this contingent on lawyer approval as far as the contract. Is that correct? I think we'll just get that out of the way. I'll take a motion in a second to approve, agenda item A under new contracts.
And I'll make that motion A and I1, I2,
Upon approval of the
lawyer.
lawyer, Scott, thank you. I have a second.
Second.
Is there further discussion or questions? Liz?
Belt,
Aye.
Burmeister,
Yes.
Brent,
Yes.
Height,
Yes.
Rowe,
Yes.
Morrison, Benton,
Yes.
Kennedy.
Yes. Court, you wanna pick up on item B, the accounting I'll go ahead and let you explain it.
Yep, the City of Council Bluffs, they approached us sometime last year, wanting to do a, planning and environmental linkages study, of potential multimodal crossing of the Missouri River. So they initially kind of were, wondering how they were gonna pull that off funding wise, and we worked with our project selection committee to basically establish, what will be an award of surface transportation block grant funding. So they'll be getting an STBG award, at least that's kind of, that'll be coming up next, later on in the agenda, but, both, the project selection committee and TTAC have, recommended approval of funding this study, with regional STBG funds, and their Council Bluffs has already actually started some of the preliminary work on it. We're basically just asking to, get this contract set up so that we can utilize those federal funds, beginning July 1st.
This also has needed legal review.
Oh, okay, yeah, and yeah, is it at legal currently, or is it?
I don't know.
Oh, that's right, yes, it was, that's right, yeah, similar to the 5310 contracts, there's some additional language that needs to be added into this agreement, so it will also need to still go to legal for review, but the contract amount is accurate, that will not be changing.
Will there be another study in addition to this then?
What do you mean?
Or is this a complete study?
Yes, yeah, this will be it. So they'll basically combine what they're doing right now. So they started some of this work in February. And that will basically be combined with the work that'll be done under this agreement into one final study. It won't be separate pieces. It'll all come together in a single Pell document.
You know, Bellsburg, Holt, and
They're
doing it all.
Yes, yeah, they're under contract with the City of Council Bluffs right now to complete some of the preliminary work, and they'll get into kind of the meat of the study once the federal funds are engaged in July.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions on board on that one? If not, if we can go to agenda item C for.
And item C, so this one is this is a prior, an older project that needs basically an updated contract. The work that we're doing with Verdis, there's a master services agreement, and then this is a task order under that master services agreement that is correcting another task order that we had under that agreement. So the master services agreement, the task order that we had exceeded the total contract amount in the master services agreement. So we are basically just correcting for that. We're reducing some of the scope. The contract is nearing its end, the task order is nearing its end, and the work isn't going to be completed anyway. It basically it didn't end up being necessary. So we are reducing the total contract amount in this task order so that it fits within that master services agreement. It shouldn't have been set as high as it was. I think there was some crossed wires about how much federal funding we actually had to complete the project. So we need to reduce the scope and the total amount of this task order.
Any questions or discussion?
No, the only discussion is that we need to do on B is proof for legal review then.
On agenda item B,
Yeah.
we can go ahead and take a motion to approve both B and C, with B being subject to legal approval.
Yeah. I'll make that motion.
Okay,
I second that.
any further questions or discussion? Liz?
Belt,
Aye.
Burmeister,
Yes.
Brent,
Yes.
Height,
Yes.
Rowe,
Yes.
Benton. Yes. And David.
Yes. Moving to agenda item 4, draft of the 2025 Transportation Improvement Program. I will take both of these under a single motion and vote unless you request that we don't. Court 25 program awards.
Yep, I'm not going anywhere yet. So I'm going to go through the different programs that MAPA administers, kind of show you what is being recommended by our project selection committees. So I'll start with service transportation block grants. We had quite a few applications this year. with a decent amount of funding. We had to cut a few projects, but for the most part, we're actually squeezing quite a few into the program. So MAPA actually applied for 2 studies. We're wanting to do a regional freight study, and then also we added a line for regional planning support, which we're going to try to roll into kind of a master services agreement later on so that we can help fill, I guess, kind of like gap work. Things come up all the time where a part of the study, they'll want to do traffic counts, that sort of thing. And we want to be able to move quickly to respond to those instead of having to go through a long process to kind of get things under contract for that. So that we're planning on using that to make us a little bit more nimble in delivering projects for member agencies. And then we get into the kind of the larger mix of projects. The city of Bellevue, they applied for 2 projects, and PROSCOM is recommending both of those. So a $9.6 million award on Cape Art Road, and then a new phase of 36th Street for just under $14 million. The city of Omaha applied for 2 projects, 1 study for 192nd and Wando at $600,000, and then 168th and Harrison Street corridor improvements. This includes a fairly significant section of Harrison Street. It's not just the intersection there. It goes up to Harrison Street a little bit more. There'll be some coordination with Sarpy County on that. Exactly how all of that is going to work out, I think they're still kind of stitching together the details, but it's a $9.7 million award for them. And then City of Papillion came back with a new request. So they actually requested a very large chunk of funding for their Portal Road / 6th Street improvements last 2 years ago when we did our previous call for projects. PROSCOM wasn't ready to commit to the whole thing at that point, so they basically phased it out. This is the 2nd phase. They came back and they'll be looking at doing that kind of later in the decade, closer to 29-30 for $12.7 million. And then Sarpy County applied for their 168th Street project. So this is from Harrison all the way down to 370. We were not able to fit that within this program, but we are recommending that award. So basically, we're going to hold this award, and it's not for the whole project. The whole project is actually closer to, I think it's 80 million at this point. So it's a very, very large chunk of change. We had some additional funding kind of towards the end of this year's program, and PROSCOM is recommending just under 27 million for that project, but that won't actually get into the TIP this year. It'll come back next year. We're just going to kind of make a note on the award letter that, you know, we'll be able to program this in the TIP in the 6th year next year. That's STBG. That's kind of the longest of all of these. Okay, there we go. Yeah, and now, all right, that works. So it's $64.5 million total through 2031. And then we'll basically be working with these project sponsors to make sure that everything is programmed appropriately. So this will all go out for a 2nd round of public comment. All of these projects went through public comment previously. We sent out, opened the public comment period in February and ran through that month. And then all of that information went to the selection committees when they met in March and April. In addition to the broader STBG awards, we also have a few mini grant award recommendations. This is made by the Department 2050 Mini Grant Committee, which is made up of members of TTAC and RPAC. Valley is doing a study at the intersection of 270th and Meeks. Climate Action Resiliency Plan was presented by Metro Transit. This is sort of a required study that they'll have to do per FDA regulations, so they want to get that done. The city of Bennington is looking to update their trail and park plan. Western Douglas County is looking to update their trails plan. The city of Omaha applied for a Safe Routes to School program, and then, as mentioned in the previous agenda item, Council Bluffs applied for their planning and environmental linkages study for the Missouri River crossing.
Court, could you back up and explain that safe routes to school program?
Yeah, so Safe Routes to School, this will be kind of a throughout the city program, where they'll be looking at connections to schools. So basically doing like a safety study, and then it'll come with implementation recommendations for each place that they look at. I don't believe they identified the specific locations that they want to look at right now, but it'll basically be throughout the city that they'll be considering different improvements that could be made to transportation infrastructure for getting kids to school.
Like walking and biking, similar to the
Right.
Wolverine Trail in Malvern, kind of that connection between where people live in this.
Exactly what I was thinking of, okay.
So south of 156th Street of Center. Extremely dangerous. I was on that this afternoon. Absolutely no sidewalk, no room for the kids to walk, except in the ruts and a 45-mile-an-hour road. And it's like, I can't believe that they would allow kids to even go there, but obviously school must have just got out because there was 60 of them.
Yeah.
Where street did you say?
156th and Center to the south of Center Street.
So Boston Boulevard.
Yeah,
Where
where-
the Heinz
oh, yeah.
Pizzeria.
Where it's winding there.
Yeah,
It's
and that's
like-
where Scott Catholic.
It's good, yeah.
So,
And make sure the kids put on that study board and stuff. It was scary to drive. It was, but anyway.
Sure.
I was just on an hour ago and know how bad it is, so.
Yep.
All right, do you wanna go on to item B there, Court?
Okay, I got a couple more.
Okay, I'm sorry,
All right, that's okay, yeah, we took in applications for almost all of our programs this year, so it was a lot. We don't have any new TAP award recommendations, so this will be quick. We're recommending that all of the projects that were, all the applications submitted should go to the new carbon reduction program. We had 4 that applied to TAP/CRP. We made it a single application, and all of these projects go through the TAP committee. In order to spend down the growing CRP balance, TAP-C is recommending that all of these be applied to CRP. So CRP is new with the IIJA, and the funding started in 2022. We haven't allocated any projects to it. And if we don't spend the 2022 funding before the end, well, not spend, but obligate that funding before the end of next year, we risk losing it. And so TAP-C made the decision to program everything under CRP because our TAP program is doing just fine right now. This probably means we'll want to open another call for projects for TAP because the later year balance will start to grow pretty significantly. So I guess keep your eyes open for that. As far as the recommendations from TAP-C, Center Street safety and multimodal improvements. So this is just west of 32nd Street, so just west of Hanson Park along Center Street. They'll be looking to do a road bed, so they want to neck it down and then add some bike ped improvements. The city of Omaha also asked for signal infrastructure phase Y. As you can tell, we're getting near the end of the alphabet with these letters. They've been doing phases of this project for something like 10 years now. Yeah, so quite a while. They use a mix of regional funding, regional federal aid selected through these programs, state CMAQ funding, and now carbon reduction program funding. Metro Transit applied for some electrical upgrades. They want to do, they've been slowly improving their electrical infrastructure here to be able to acquire more and more electric vehicles. So it's all part of that. They want to upgrade some of their facilities within this building. And then Bennington requested funding to do some improvements to the Big Patio Trail. And we're able to program that a little bit later in the program. I think some of the stuff related to that will come out in their trail plan update, which is being funded with the Heartland 2050 million program. So it all kind of ties together there. These are the recommendations from TAP-C totaling just under 16 million.
So what's the significant balance they're carrying?
So the balance for TAP, off the top of my head, I don't remember what it is at the end of the program. So we get about $2.5 million a year, and this means that 29 and 30, and then next year 31, basically we'll have at least 3 years of funding. So we're looking at 7 to 8 million that we'll have in 2031. I think it's a little bit higher than that, though. I think it's actually getting close to 10 million with the balance that's left over from 28.
But we won't lose this?
No, the TAP funding is not, it's not in danger of being lost. It was just that we hadn't programmed anything in CRP. That's what made it a little bit dangerous. We're working with NDOT to make sure that we get the projects programmed appropriately, so we utilize the 2022 funding. And yeah, I didn't want to like spook anybody about it, but it was kind of necessary to program a lot of those projects into CRP instead of using TAP, because we have projects utilizing the TAP funds right now. We don't have any projects utilizing CRP. We kind of need to get the program going.
Yeah, so as Court noted, it's a brand new program. While the funding became immediately available to us, we didn't have guidance until 2 to 3 years into the infrastructure bill. And so we weren't able to select for projects and understand what the funds could be used for. And so taking existing projects, swapping the funding to use the older lapsing funding. And so bit of a fund management strategy, and DOT is working closely with us to make sure that we don't lose any of the authority.
But that CRP money is available for both Iowa and Nebraska.
Yep, so there's about 300,000 available on the Iowa side each year.
We didn't get any applications on the Iowa side.
But is the 300,000 earmarked for Iowa, so
Yes.
are they at risk of losing it?
Yes, and we are working with Iowa DOT to figure out a way to correct that issue.
So it has to go through the DOT.
Yes.
Okay, then we get that correct. I got 300,000.
Yeah.
Talk to the city or the county. Or Crescent, McClellan.
And Mayor Hindig, that's mine.
That's
4A, so we can go to 4B.
Any questions for Court on that part of it? If not, we'll have him move right into 4B.
All right, so that 4A section is really the meat of what we're talking about as far as the draft tip is concerned. For the most part, that's kind of the interesting part of all of it. We are fiscally constrained through 2030 on the within the draft tip, and TTAC is recommending that the board open a public comment period that will go through June 24th. So it'll open basically after this meeting, and we'll run it through the 24th, and then we'll bring that tip back in June, the June board meeting for final approval. And then sometime during that period, we'll also send it off to the state DOTs for their review and kind of tentative approval until we can actually get the board stamp in June.
If there's no question on that part of it, can I have a motion to approve both 4A and 4B?
So moved.
Second, right? And if there's no other discussion, Liz?
Belt, Burmeister,
Yes.
Friend,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Rowe,
Yes.
Morrison,
Yes.
Benton,
Yes.
Hindig.
Yes. Item 5, I'm gonna go ahead and take both 5A and 5B on this, unless you would like to have it pulled separately. Mike, do you want to start with 5A?
Sure, so the FY25 annual authorizing resolution is a tool that the board has been using for a long time to authorize me as executive director to execute the agreements that are approved in the work program. This is for the work program activities that are on the agenda here to follow. Largely, it just captures the funding sources that traditionally MAPA has had access to, allows us to accept the funding towards the implementation of MAPA's work program and budget on an annual basis. That's item A. Item B is specific to our unified planning work program and many of the transportation studies that MAPA leads. Because some of these use funding outside of our traditional planning agreement, NDOT requires a separate authorizing resolution to allow MAPA to accept that without board approval. And it's kind of a timeline thing where we, in the past, have brought those resolutions to the board to accept those funds that you've already approved in your UPWP. This allows us to accept those funds, start billing our staff time towards those projects as we procure consultants and do the administrative work related to those projects. So it's an efficiency in line with the other authorizing resolution to authorize the executive director to implement the work program on an annual basis.
Any questions or discussions for Mike on that? If not, I take a motion in a second to approve.
So moved. Thanks, Bill. Second.
And if there's no further discussion, Liz?
Belt.
Aye.
Burmeister.
Yes.
Friend.
Yes.
Height.
Yes.
Rowe.
Yes.
Morrison.
Yes.
Benton.
Yes.
Kennedy.
Yes. Under item 6 is the MAPA work, program and budget. We will take these separately. Agenda item A, are the agency work programs. Mike and Matt, you want to address this?
Sure, so we've grouped these a little bit differently than we have in the past. Hopefully this will make it a little bit more simplified to understand. So item A is our agency work programs. The Unified Planning Work Program is our required submittal of our agency's budget and staff activities for the fiscal year beginning July 1 to June 30th of each year. And so what we have before the board today on the Unified Planning Work Program is Amendment 1 to the FY24. So that's through the period of June 30 this year, a refinement and kind of an estimate of where we will end up on the execution of that budget. And then also the final FY25 work program, our recommendation for activities after July 1. We provide the FY25 Community Development Work Program. This is kind of just an internal staff control just to provide us kind of with consistency across the agency to understand kind of where kind of provide a similar format for our community development work program activities. It's not a required deliverable to any federal agency, but it is useful to kind of see on a sort of an equal basis the staff activities across our departments. So I'm going to step through these sort of sequentially, talking about the FY24, UPWP Amendment 1, and then just go directly into FY25 work program. And then I'll pause after the transportation piece just because it's kind of all goes together. So with the FY24 Unified Planning Work Program, this largely represents but what you've seen before in terms of the execution of our work program. A few things to highlight, the total funding sources across the top, just to orient you, kind of the columns that go across are the different funding sources that we have access to, a mix of what we're called our PL or planning funding, both from from FHWA and FTA. And other sources of funding like CMAQ, Congestion Management and Air Quality, and STBG on an annual basis. So we access those funds through our state DOT partners, Iowa DOT and Nebraska DOT. You can see the funding amounts there. The final two columns are a little bit different and unique. US DOT funding for our Safe Streets and Roads for All project. That is a discretionary award directly from US DOT in DC. And you see that column there and what we've executed through this year. And then 5310 is that separate FTA apportionment, 2 contracts of which we executed earlier about supporting paratransit service for elderly and disabled residents here in the Omaha Council Bluffs metro area. So the columns across the top there are the various funding sources. I'm mostly on the FY24 since it is just kind of a revision to basically show what work is getting carried forward in FY25. Going to focus mostly on the total transportation funding column just to orient you. So within the total UPWP budget, the funding available is that $3.7 million, the total kind of personnel costs for MAPA is that $3.7 million cost. That includes our indirect costs, fringe, and other direct non-labor costs. The MAPA activities band there is really what those direct costs are associated with. So that includes MAPA staff time and other things. See the total of $2.1 million of activities in that MAPA activities line item estimated through June 30th of this year. The contracts and subrecipient bands is really our best estimate of where many of our pass-through and consultant contracts are going to end up by June 30th this year. You see a number of things that were referenced here today on the agenda, including our Safe Streets and Roads for All project, our on-call modeling, which is really to support the travel demand modeling activities for our long-range plan, some of our congestion management, air quality efforts with Veritas Group, the task order that Core presented, and kind of the culmination of those services. And then many of our pass-through agreements, whether those are to consultants for Heartland 2050 mini grant activities, or our planning support for agencies like our GIS departments and planning departments across the agency. So with those planning subrecipients, a total of $263,000 directly passed on to MAPA members, $425,000 of planning support through consultant efforts here too. The final 310 line item there is our aerial photography activities for this year. This is our first flight under the new aerial photography contract through our NIROC partnership. And so that total of $308,000 is the match that we utilize for the purposes of our transportation planning funding. So as I've talked about before, that joint purchase of aerial photography for MAPA 6 counties, in Douglas, Sarpy, and Potawatomi County, we're able to use that as soft match towards our transportation funding, reducing our reliance on dues and cash match for MAPA. So it's a good strategy for us in delivering a service that's useful to our members and important to the transportation planning process. So kind of rolling that all up in that MAPA total band there at the bottom, a $3.7 million budget for all of these activities together. The gray band at the bottom shows the source of matches. Just to draw your attention to the state funding line, we don't actually receive much, if any, on an annual basis, state funding for our transportation planning activities. Most of it is federal, and MAPA cash was not utilized terribly heavily for this current year, just because we were able to show third-party match from other contributions by our local partners, that soft match from aerial photography, and other contributions towards the planning process here as well. And so a total of $802,000 in matching funds estimated through the period here ending on June 30th. So that's kind of looking back and looking ahead to June 30th. Any questions before I talk about July 1 forward?
No, just one, I guess, is that just the man hours that you guys use there on
The hours estimate is kind of a rough estimate of effort. Yes, I mean, those line items also include other direct costs, and so it's not exactly one-to-one, because those line items are allocated kind of across, or some of those costs are allocated across different line items. Matt, I don't know if you.
I will have to challenge that assessment, Mike, because I have done a lot of work in the last 3 years to get those numbers as close to reality as possible. But yes, Mike's right. There's no way to know for certain, towards the end of the year. We could only look at history. So there's still a bit of an estimate built into this for last quarter. But yes, I sit down with transportation staff, and they go over and try to predict their hours they're going to work, and we run that through a model. So there is modeling that's going on for those numbers.
Because they would have to monitor some of these sub-recipients and stuff too.
A lot of that, yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so the next page there, the FY25 Unified Planning Work Program, same structure. I'm not going to dwell too much on all of this, but to note that the federal funding line items at the top there do show some carryover. So we are anticipating some carryover of funds between the 24, kind of the thing we just reviewed, and 25. So kind of a continuation of that work. The funding sources that have carryover into the next year include our Nebraska DOT PL allocation, some of the CMAQ funding that's available to implement our Little Steps Cleaner Air project, and then STBG funding available for some of those consultant pass-through projects. Additionally, the US DOT Safe Streets for All funding, $750,000 total. We are executing about $125,000 of that by June 30th. The remainder of that is anticipated in 2025. And then many of those 5310 subrecipient agreements, similar to the ones that were highlighted earlier in the agenda. Going down to the MAPA activities, it's a $2.6 million estimate for MAPA activities. Again, those are personnel costs, other direct costs associated with the transportation planning process. It's not just specific to the transportation department. Other departments are pulled into transportation planning activities like finance and administration in many of those activities. And this also reflects kind of the best estimate across those different activities that we talk about in our narrative on an annual basis. Contracts and subrecipients, several kind of key things here. The LRTP survey, this is some online software tools in support of our long-range plan, which is due in October of 2025. So just outside of this budget year, but doing a lot of the outreach and development of that plan over the next year. $680,000 includes the match for the Safe Streets and Roads for All, executing the various consultant agreements towards that Vision Zero-esque plan for the region. $437,000, that reflects the consultant agreement that you approved earlier for the planning and environmental linkages studies that utilizes that STBG funding from Iowa. On-call modeling, $98,000 in task orders. One thing of note here, about $48,000 of that is anticipated for kind of MAPA's development, and there's $50,000 in there for support for the comprehensive plan from the city of Omaha and providing them with some traffic data in support of that land use planning, which we're anticipating will be locally funded. So a note there that $98,000 includes federal and a large share of local funding anticipated for those activities. Traffic data services, we had a partnership with the city of Council Bluffs this year to essentially have an additional PL pass-through to support some traffic counting activities. We're looking for other opportunities to do that here in the next year for a total of 50,000 across that line item. The congestion management or congestion mitigation and air quality line item, that's the funding that's available for CMAQ activities in the upcoming year. With the COVID-19 pandemic and the climate action plan at the city and regional level, we're in a little bit of a holding pattern just to make sure we can put those funds to the highest and best use, but they are available should we come up with a good use for those here in the next year. And then $1.27 million for Heartland 2050 mini grant projects. So that's really a culmination of projects that were shifted from 24 to 25 and new awards anticipated here in the new calendar year. Those projects are typically funded by matching agreements from our partners who provide the 20% match to the federal money for those grants, and with MAPA administering those projects as a member service. Our planning and local subrecipients, a total of $418,000 across those activities for the upcoming year. This is for GIS departments, Metro Transit, and I think, is that it this year? I think that's it this year. Just the GIS departments and Metro Transit receiving awards for those activities that directly support our regional transportation planning process. And so a reduction over last year on those PL pass-through agreements, but some good projects to support our process. We highlighted in the last FY24, $1.6 million for 5310 subrecipient agreements. So these are operations contracts for those nonprofit and public agencies providing services for the elderly and disabled. And then aerial photography activities. The flights for NIROC occur in the spring. Some of the deliverables are delivered to our members after July 1, and this is the portion that we are anticipating the value of those deliverables that will be anticipated after July 1. That's an accounting practice that we have to do to utilize those activities as match. So a total of $242,000 of matching funds from that aerial photography project after July 1. So a total budget then for contracts and subrecipients of $5.5 million. Total activities for MAPA anticipated at around $8.2 million. This is, I would say, aspirational in terms of the anticipated timeline. A lot of this is externally driven by our partners in terms of their willingness and readiness to move things ahead, but we do want to make sure that we're representing the funding so we don't have to come back and reauthorize those activities later in the year. A total of $2.1 million of match for those activities within the work program. More MAPA cash in terms of the tip fees and dues and reserves that we utilize for our activities this year than in past. A big portion of that comes from the Safe Streets and Roads for All project, which is that large regional study that is Vision Zero related. I will note that we do have a small amount of state funding anticipated for this as well from the HSIP program in Iowa to support our Safe Streets and Roads for All, which is different than in past years. We've never had that before. So any questions on the work program, July 1 to June 30th of FY25?
Wait, quick question. The congestion mitigation air quality, does that money have a time limit on it?
It does, but not an explicit one. The part of it is that the funding was made available to us in 2020. It's obligated currently. Were it to be de-obligated, it would have a very short window. The funding is obligated by the state of Nebraska, NDOT. So it's currently obligated. It's currently not subject to any of that. But if we were to de-obligate it and give it back to the state, they would have to have a purpose for doing that. I'll just note, some of the strategies that we had applied for that funding for were around, shifting, first understanding the workplace characteristics, how people get to and from work, kind of really focusing on commuter patterns. With the COVID-19 pandemic, it was really upended. I mean, if you would have told me that, a significant portion of people were going to be doing remote work and reducing their burden on the transportation system, we would have called that a success. We didn't have to spend the money to make that narrative at the regional level, but it has fundamentally changed our ability to access that. So with the climate reduction plan, though, particularly with the city of Omaha's leadership on that effort, I think there's going to be some opportunities to retool that, go back to the state and get a different scope of work for those activities. None of that's been decided yet, but again, reflecting those here will allow us to have that flexibility to implement this fiscal year. Yeah, it's a good question.
I just have to bring this up in case it may derail our progress through getting these approved at the federal level. Did you see Carlos's email that just came in?
I have not been.
Okay. I was watching my email. FTA came in with a number and it's $9,873 less than we have on the stock.
Oh. Okay,
So I don't know if you want to address that, maybe we have to do it would adjust all of our other our budget documents by that dollar amount. It's not, I wouldn't call it material because it's a small dollar amount and it won't really affect, anything materially how the agency operates, but
I think
it may affect whether or not this gets approved by a federal highway.
yeah. Well, it'd be FTA. We've been asking for that number for about 3 months now, and so the timing's great.
So just to kind of, because we're talking inside baseball here, Federal Transit has not provided us with its FY 25 allocation to put on this document. So we used last year's as a placeholder. And I just got an email I didn't see it until after the meeting started, but at 12:48 saying, here's your number. Great. So, and it's $9,873 less than the placeholder amount. So instead of $521,792, if you look at the third column over on the funding side on FY 25, it says $521,792. The actual number is $511,919. Brought to us by FTA today, 45 minutes before this meeting began.
So make an amendment to
I
that
was gonna say.
dollar figure. Should take care of that as far as.
I think so. That'll give us the flexibility to make this change. So if we were ever audited in the board, for board actions, then we can make this change after the fact. Because I don't think it'll get approved now that they've given us the number.
Now that the number is lower, if the number had been higher, we could have.
We've been fine.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, any questions on FY 25 for the transportation? With that note, I mean, Mayor Kindig, do you want to take action on items 1 and 2, just given that
The size
special-
of them.
Well, the size of them and the special consideration of
Yes.
the FTA funding?
Let's do that. So if I could have a motion and a second to approve items 6A, 1 and 2 with the amendment of the dollar figure. And Matt, you want to give that again, please?
To amend the FTA, Nebraska FTA 5305 number from $521,792 to $511,919.
Okay, further discussion or questions by council? Liz?
Bell. Burmeister.
Yes.
Garcia, I'm sorry, Friend,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Morris, Rowe,
Yes.
Morrison. Morrow. Vinton.
Yes.
Kindig.
Yes. Now we'll move on to agenda item 6A3.
It's deeply frustrating, but Matt is right. Our planning agreement would not get approved without changing that number, but. Okay, moving to the community development work program, a similar structure to this, the funding sources across the top. EPA and EDA being the Economic Development Administration, the Environmental Protection Agency being the 2 leading funders through this. One thing of note here, the reliance that we have on dues and state funding much higher on our community development work program. We've talked about that in the past. It's kind of a complementary aspect of our planning activities here at the regional level. CARES Act funding, so this is a remainder of funding allocated through some COVID bills, about $70,000 worth of funds within FY 24 I'm looking at the FY 24 budget. I should be looking at FY 25. We provided the FY 24 simply by reference. We don't have to take any formal action on that. That's really just for your knowledge there. I should have caught that. Looking at the FY 25 budget, this is again kind of our period here from July 1 to June 30th of next year of 2025. A total within this budget of federal funding around $195,000 anticipated. The execution of projects here in the year as disaster funding comes in, likely to change. We have that placeholder column there for EDA. Again, that's something that usually comes in 3 to 6 months after disaster events when Congress is able to take action. If public assistance is provided for those disasters in Iowa and Nebraska. On that note, then the total community development work program budget, again, that direct cost, indirect costs highlighted there is about $1.14 million anticipated in the next fiscal year. About $1,089,000 of that is anticipated to be those MAPA activities, kind of those internal activities, staffing, and other things related to that. We do have far fewer contracts and subrecipients on the community development side. One of those being the EPA Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. This is our support of the city of Omaha's EPA CPRG project and providing a regional context to that. We have $25,000 line item for some consultant support on that project. And then the 5210 program in Council Bluffs, $12,000 of funding available for direct grants to those partners. If you recall, last month, I believe we approved the grants for year 1. This is the year 2 funding. There is a year 3 funding that is slightly smaller as well. So you'll see that next year as well. So total activities on the community development work program budget, $1.14 million or $1,114,000 of total activities. And the state funding is anticipated around $184,000. That's from various sources, including NDED and IEDA on the Iowa side, and MAPA cash, whether that's dues, tip fees, or reserves, being $544,000 on that side. One thing that's changed between the draft and the final here, we did present a version of this last month. We did articulate out some of those local service agreements that we're anticipating in the year ahead, about $190,000 worth of things that are really committed at this point that we can count on, other projects to come in throughout the year that'll help offset some of that initial MAPA cash estimate. And so that's the FY25 community development work program.
Questions, Mike, on that? If not, can I have a motion and second to approve?
Motion.
No further discussion. Liz?
Bell. Burmeister.
Yes.
Friend.
Yes.
Height.
Yes.
Rowe.
Yes.
Morrison.
Yes.
Benson.
Yes.
Kennedy.
Yes. Item 6 B. We can take these together unless we decide to separate them, but if not, Mike or Matt, do you want to comment on this?
Yeah, well, they're presented here. I'll touch the high points page by page, Matt. I'll let you cover anything I miss here. So again, structure of this, the blue column to the left there is the new recommended budget. This is again, July 1 to June 30th of next year. This is for the entire agency. The work programs that you just approved comprise a large portion of this, but there's also all the additional things that we do that fall outside of those specific categories. The yellow column is our FY24 amended. This is again, our estimate through June 30th of execution of our budget for the past year. And then really just for context is our FY23 audited financial statements that were presented to the board in March of this year, February of this year. And there, so a little bit of year over year context here. The yellow and blue are the 2 action items here that you have before you on the agenda today. So walking through this, I'll just go through the pages here. The first page here is federal funding and state funding in our funds budget. There's kind of 3 components of our budget that we present. So you have the funds budget, the line item budget, and the program budget. We'll step through them kind of each individually and pause for any questions. On the first page here of the funds budget, you see the federal funding by department and the state funding by department. This largely restates what you just saw in the work programs, but you can see then the trend in terms of FY24 to FY25, kind of the overall execution there. State funding, largely similar, and anticipated larger amount of federal funding, largely driven by transportation projects and many of those pass-through agreements. Matt, anything you wanted to highlight on that first page?
Nothing in particular, except that when we do this motion, I'll have to also ask that you allow us to adjust based on the adjustments made to the FY25 UPWP, which feed into these numbers.
Yeah. And so that Matt raises a good point, that FTA 5305 number noted in FY25 is going to be reduced by that roughly $9,000 number. Moving on to page 2 of the funds budget, this includes much of our non-federal funding. So this includes match contributions for that unified planning work program and our community development work program, matching contributions for things that we use in our EDA RLF. So this is our partnership with the Nebraska Enterprise Fund. We showed the figures in FY24 and not in FY25 simply because we don't have any loans that have been made through the in FY25 yet. That's really driven by demand there. We have some of our non-governmental funding highlighted here. These are our events. And so these are revenues, funds that we anticipate that are offset by the costs of running those events. And so you see a total of $38,000. $750 there. And then down below this, we kind of break out our county membership, our strategic planning, drone photography, and then the RPA, the regional planning affiliation, which we use a portion of county dues that are contributed by Mills and Pot County. For that, we also receive dues from Harrison and Shelby County that are outside the MAPA planning district to support those activities as well. The final line item here on page 2 is those tip fees. We anticipate, or we budget for $180,000 of tip fees on those projects. Year to year, it fluctuates. Some years it's much higher than $180,000. Some years it's much lower. 180,000 has kind of been the number that in general we can count on a year to year basis. It's a good benchmark for us to use. That's all based on the execution of our TIP program and which funds get obligated year to year. Anything you'd like to highlight?
No,
Okay.
not on that page.
All right. And so then the final page of our funds budget, page 3 here, shows kind of those additional member services and other sources of revenue here. From the draft to the final, we've articulated out that $190,000 of ComDev contracts. These are things that we can reasonably anticipate here in the coming year. We're anticipating there will be more of those driven by the disaster, but we can't anticipate those yet today. Under miscellaneous, one thing to note here as we presented the draft to the final, our investment earnings have grown significantly in the last couple of years, largely driven by more funding in MAPA's newly created cash reserve, but also a very favorable interest rate environment. The MAPA board has approved our laddered reserves and kind of investment strategy of basically having instruments like treasuries or CDs, rolling off on an annual basis and kind of finding the most attractive interest rates at that time. And it's proven to really drive a significantly larger amount of investment earnings than we've seen in previous years. And so you see that change from FY23 to what we're anticipating for FY25 being right around $100,000. And then for that total undesignated revenue within the budget is that $1.1 million number for FY25. It was about $1.9 million in FY24. The total of our revenues then is that $9.6 million anticipated for FY25. Again, largely driven by a larger amount of anticipated federal funding and the associated match for those transportation related projects. And then the fund adjustments. Matt, do you want to talk a little bit about the cash reserve and that piece?
Sure. And these, for those members who are on the finance committee, these numbers have changed slightly. This is a below the line, sort of an unofficial change, or an unofficial component of our budget document. This is not audited per se. The subtotal revenues line is the audited number, but this helps. I've added this over the years to help show that MAPA doesn't operate on a zero sum end of year game. We receive funds in one year for maybe some local match, and it sits in one of our investment accounts and draws interest until we use it in a subsequent year. But when we do use it, that expenditure hits in that year when the revenue was in the prior year. So the expenditure tends to make it look like we're in a deficit. So these funds are shown below the line here in this fund adjustment section to help show that we have these monies as carryover, and we're using them to apply when we expect the expenditure to hit, so that we can essentially balance them out. So it doesn't appear. Now, when we're audited on true expenditures that accrue in that year. So if we have a deficit, that's what our auditors will look at to see how much we come in deficit or surplus. But this is just to show the board that we're not broke. We actually have the money, and that we're allocating those existing funds in our cash balance. So it's a work in progress is to make this easier to understand, and so it may change over the years as we get to a better document. But and I welcome your feedback. But you'll see on we've added 10-4999. This was in order to create transfers in. We created the cash reserve fund, a separate fund. We call it Fund 50 in our accounting software. But that is now the board's fund. So money will go in there at the board's direction, and it will not come out without the board's direction. And this was something we set up last fiscal year because we have these excess cash sitting in our bank account with no direction as to what to do with it. So I wanted to have them give the board, and you agreed. And so you made an arbitrary designation of $1 million would go into that fund by the end of FY24. So you'll see that if you go on well, not the transfers in, but if you go to the 10-320, those committed funds, and I'll show you that on the subsequent pages. You see $1 million in FY '24. We just put that into this new fund. And so that is sitting in this new fund, subject to board direction in the future, however you want to use that. Similar to this way the state cash reserve fund uses, it gives it, the legislature controls it and it stays in there until they decide to take it out.
So Matt,
But it's committed already, down to 287,000.
Well, I'm talking about in the yellow. So the million is for,
Yeah, it's good, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and the board has authorized
For
some,
next year, it's.
Yeah.
You've already committed some.
well, I'm going to commit some more into the cash reserve. Well, about 250 of that's gonna go in, or 260 of that will go into the cash reserve again. That's just a forecast.
Okay.
If we don't end up with that money, then we won't put it in, but that's just a forecast for FY '25.
If I committed, you mean that's additional funding, so potentially at the end of '25, you'd have 1.287 rather than.
Yes,
correct.
yes. And the reason we have to do this is because we created the cash reserve this year. So previously, all the funds that were sitting in our bank account that were either undesignated, in other words, they're just collecting interest and nobody's really got any plans for them. Or I brought them up to you in an investment strategies, which we'll do next month. And the board said, yes, we want to commit these funds for these objectives. When those become committed, then they need to be shown here as that the board has designated those funds. So that commitment there is also that $1 million that was previously, because it's a new fund, sitting in the cash account of $1 million. Now it's in the cash reserve account, which is a separate, will probably stay in the same, well, we'll put it in NPay, so we'll create its own little bank account. But
then is that collecting interest?
yeah, I mean, the money's already collecting interest, it's just not designated cash reserve fund. We'll create that name in the end page so that you can look at the monthly financials and see that it's sitting in there and collecting interest. But here is just an accounting concept. So in order to show that we already had those $1 million, I put them on the committed funds line. When you look at the line item budget, you'll see that it's then transfers out into cash reserves, which washes it out as a net zero impact to the funds, because we already have the money. It's not like that money is, it's not like it's new revenue, which is why it's in the fund adjustment section and not above the line, because it's not new revenue, money that already exists. But anyway, so that was new because we just put that $1 million in the system, so that was not available at Finance Committee. Again, like I said, that has a net zero impact on the budget. There is a little bit in the blue section in the FY '25 that I added as, so about 260 of that is my projected surplus in FY '24 that we will just, for now, predict that we'll put that in cash reserves. If it's surplus, we don't need it. And then there's a little bit more that I added in order to bring ultimately the net budget to zero for FY '25. That's more of an arbitrary construct just to show that we're at net zero. But again, those funds are agency funds that exist in our account today. And that's about 14 or 15,000 to get there. But you'll see then that bottom line, the 10-30-10, that's our assigned restricted funds. So those are funds that come in external to the agency in 1 year and we hold them until we can use them. And we've predicted that we'll use about 46,000 in FY '25 and about 72,000 in FY '24. The FY '24 number is a little bit lower than was that Finance Committee. But the one in FY '25 is the same. These are guesses. We don't really know, even to this point, we don't know how much our contractors are going to spend in the month of June drawing down some of these match funds. And it's even less, we have less foresight of that for FY '25. So these are just guesses. So that's why it's in the fund adjustments. These numbers are not critical or high risk to the agency as to whether they're executed the way they are. It's just to show you that if we do execute these, as we think we will, there has to be some accounting of the funds that we're using when we're spending them. Otherwise, it looks like we're $300,000 in the hole. So questions on that? I know, lots of questions, right?
Yeah, I can spend it.
Matt, just kind of jumping the gun, but did we ever renew our office lease? We were talking about that immediately.
No.
You can talk to the negotiator right there next to you.
So we are currently month to month, as we have been for the last 2 fiscal years with
Okay,
Metro
well,
Transit.
you must be happy.
The framework that we have, agreed to kind of just in principle, does include a higher per square foot cost to MAPA, and more square footage, like these shared spaces aren't included in our current lease, and our usage of them isn't accounted for in our current lease structure. That's all being reviewed by the Federal Transit Administration, who funded the construction of this building and has oversight of lease agreements within it. I have not heard any direction on that framework. And so currently we're month to month at a lower rate for now, as we have been for the last 2 fiscal years, and we're going to continue that
Can't build a building, so.
until they ask us for more money on a monthly basis. But,
Okay, good enough.
yes. Any other questions on the funds budget? Otherwise, I'll go into the line item budget, which. So the first page of the line item budget on page 4 largely restates the funds budget as a summary. Again, Matt's funds adjustments that he just noted there are detailed there at the bottom of the page for both FY24 and FY25. Going to page 5 on the expenses side of things, with the benefits renewals that you saw there, those are all reflected within the estimates for FY 2025, as are the rates that were changed mid-year with FY 24. One thing that we didn't highlight with Christina in her item is that we had previously been on benefits renewals around September for many of our things, including group health. That was very difficult to budget around. Last year, we had a 30% increase mid-year. By moving to NACO, we're actually able to align those benefit renewals with our fiscal year. And so this is our benefit renewals. We're not going to have that surprise going forward. Because of that surprise last year and trying to get through that, we had not pursued one approved FTE within our budget. So that was a grants and agreements specialist position. We're currently advertising for that position now. And so that one FTE for the grants and agreements position is reflected in the FY25 budget, as is a deputy director position, which is included in our salary schedule that's approved by the board each year, but we have not advertised for that. We are anticipating doing that later in the fiscal year as well. And so the FY24 budget that you see here reflects those authorized positions and vacancy savings. We've had some turnover, as we do each year, but that kind of reflects our total agency budget for the year. And then on non-labor expenses, we have the kind of various categories here. These haven't really changed from the draft. I'm not going to spend too much time on anything here on page 5, unless Matt, there's something.
I just wanted to call out just to orient. So if anybody, any of the board members are interested in seeing our execution based on our original budget, you can look. I kind of softened the coloring so we wouldn't focus so much on that and focus on what you'll be approving. You'll be approving obviously the amended budget as well as the FY25, but the FY24 budget current, you can see what we predicted this time last year for FY24, and you can note any of the variances there. If you have any questions about those variances, why they were higher or lower, we can talk about those as we go through the next two pages. And then I think, Mike pointed out that the salaries growth there is largely because we on FY24, you can see that we predicted 1.8 million. We're now pretty confident that the 1.78, now that we're into end of May, 1.78 million is going to be where we're going to hit on salaries. And the 2.053 for FY25 is based on the expectation of full salaries, no salary vacancies. So FY24 is the benefit of vacancies. And you just can't budget for vacancies within a small agency of 26 people. So we don't. So that's why that variance is higher in FY25. Also, you'll see down in the office expenses, it's the bottom block. We've changed some of the way we're structuring our expenses. And you'll see that we have data processing now where it says 1 year or less. This is a result of some changes in accounting rules brought on by the General Accounting Standards Board. And so we're splitting up our data processing. Anything where we have a subscription of 1 year or less goes on this line now, and anything that's higher than that will go on the next page under capital outlays. Also created and given a little more definition to the miscellaneous / de minimis account. I don't like the term miscellaneous in accounting, but my staff always tells me, it's like, what are we going to put this? And then they catch me and make me say miscellaneous. So we will put de minimis transactions in there and various weird things that we never thought we would ever spend our money on for, you know, small dollar amounts that will go in there. And then office lease, we just talked about that. Notice that that's office lease or rentals 1 year or less. We're assuming in FY 25 that we're gonna get that long-term lease, so we're not budgeting for our office lease there, but so we zeroed that out, but you'll notice that we're it should be about $70,000 this year, going month to month, so that's why there's a line item there.
And moving on to page 6, Matt noted this just now, but the capitalized lease, that would be that long-term lease agreement. I don't recall offhand, FTA requires a renewal of those lease agreements for use of, again, FTA funded property. I believe it's every 5 years. It might be every 3 years. I don't have that in front of me. But again, it's capitalized because it's more than 1 year. And as Matt noted here, these capital outlays largely reflect the new GASB standards here and how we're forced to account them. So you won't see an exact one-to-one across the lines here because those are new for this year. Our travel budget, we've broken this out as opposed to previous years. Previous years, we've had line items related to just general staff participation in conferences and virtual things all fall under our travel budget. This is actually closer to our true budget that is staff travel going out, and we've brought that conference registration down into its own line item here to account for that and kind of give a better vision on when staff are actually in travel status as part of their work here. And that's a total of $40,000 for that line item. We have this professional development category as well. Within that, the conference registration is new. The personnel management line item is new as well. So many of the HR functions that Christina oversees were sort of split across various things. We wanted to provide a little bit of vision into that personnel management activities here and provide that focus here. So you'll see that's a difference from previous years as well. And then again, kind of the procurements and subawards. So we've covered these in terms of both FY24 and FY25, generally through the work program. And then we get into kind of the bottom line here on the funds budget, the revenue less expenses, very similar to what we presented last week. But Matt, do you want to talk a little bit about that revenues less expenses line item?
Yes, I highlighted revenue less expenses because of feedback from the board in the past, where I was sort of understating or under displaying that line item. That is the audited line item, right? So that's where we show whether or not we executed well and meet the audit standards. So we're expecting in FY24, you'll notice that we had predicted a $485,000 deficit. Again, that's because we had a bunch of one-time costs that we were predicting to spend in FY24. Mostly that was software. So we have the NetSuite. We were assuming we would procure our new financial system, and then that would go against a one-time cost for implementation costs, as well as some software that Transportation Data Services Department wanted that they were going to purchase in FY24. That was the prediction. Well, we executed very little of that. So we ended up with, and also we had vacancy savings in our salaries. So those are the two main components. We did not execute most of the software purchases in FY24, and we had vacancy savings on our labor costs, which swung us from a minus 485 budgeted to a 207,000 structural surplus for FY24. So we're a month out, and then a couple months then from reconciling to see how accurate we are, but we're pretty confident that we're going to have about a $200,000 surplus in FY24. Be that as it may, this just goes in to explain why we show the fund adjustments, because we have an actual, at the time, we thought we were going to have an actual $485,000 deficit. That looks really bad, but it was because most of it was going to be using existing cash surplus to pay for those one-time costs, and the board acknowledged that and approved that. So, but without the analysis of the fund adjustments, it just looks like there's a $485,000 hole to fill. So anyway, so that's for FY24. If you look into FY25, we're predicting about a structure, again, another deficit, but only about $53,000, and that again because. Largely because we're not expecting to use a lot of our carryover funds in FY23, although that could change by the end of the year, in which case when we'll come back for an amendment, those numbers may change, but, the transfers you'll see here then, if you look on fund adjustments, you'll see that I've got the $1 million and 264,000 both being added to the cash reserve fund. Now, the million has happened because the board ordered that last year for FY24, so that just took place. The 264,725, if you look, is the estimate of cash increase to the agency at the bottom of FY24, the yellow column. You'll see 264,725. If that happens, we have to assume our budget is 100% accurate. If that happens, then that's $264,000 that we're saying on this budget that MAPA doesn't need, so we might as well put it in cash reserve. So in FY25, we would, if this bore out 100% accurately, we would then put it in there. Based on this budget, the board approves it, we could just go ahead and execute that without board action. If these numbers change, which they likely will, we'll probably make this recommendation to adjust that dollar amount and then have the board decide at that point, to approve that increase to the cash reserves. Just note that with this new responsibility of the board to manage the cash reserve fund, once you put it in there, MAPA staff, MAPA administration cannot touch that money until you make formal action at board meeting,
And generally, the framework when we approved the cash reserve was for one-time expenses, things that aren't general operating revenue and things like that. So that's where, like with the ERP implementation and other one-time purchases, that's the things that have been directed out of that cash reserve to date. And we would continue to recommend that structure.
Because that's in the money market.
Yes, we'll probably put that in a money market just so it's liquid. We do have some funds and CDs and some treasuries that are some are 1, 2, 3. I think I even have a 4-year now because the rates have been better. But most of the funds, and we go over this in the monthlies at the finance committee, but most of the funds are in the money market, with the equivalent of a money market. It's drawing about 5 1/4 right now.
Investment program next month.
Yep, the update to
Yes.
What kind of balance do you hope to carry in that reserve fund?
Well, it is a new structure for us to have a reserve fund, Councilman. And so, part of the discussion of it was when we had just a large amount of funding that, through the COVID years in particular, we had a lot of federal funding come to the agency and really offset our need for dues and tip fees to a certain extent during that period. And so, it is the accumulation of local contributions to MAPA for either dues or things like that. And so for us, on an annual basis, in a perfect world, we'd ask for just what we needed to execute and net out 0 to 0. But because of the fact that those funds exist solely because our members have contributed to it, we want to put those in the direction of the board and you all direct what we do with those funds. And so I don't know that there's a specific target. I will say that when we set up that cash reserve fund, there was general agreement from the finance committee and board that 15% of our annual budget is a pretty healthy cash reserve and a good thing. And that's in like a useful tool, obviously in the current environment where we're able to realize investment earnings off of that again kind of offsets our need and reliance on the amount of cash. And so I don't know that there's a specific target that we've set, but perhaps that's a good discussion for our investment line item next month, and we can get into that and maybe what the difference might be.
Right. I think it would be a good discussion. I think as a city, our goal is that 22 to 28% of our general fund that we got at reserve. I know Papillion, I think they got in policy that they'll at least be, I think it's 30. So I don't think it would hurt maybe to have the finance committee look at a policy. I'm sure we've all got something.
But it depends on our operation, and depends on your burn rate, what you have for capacity before you receive revenue from taxes. That number increases every year a little bit.
Right.
Yeah, and I would just say too, part of this, again, as we're trying to give the board more tools to manage both things like the cash reserve and the budget, part of that goes into that dues discussion each year and how aggressive we want to be on setting dues each year and all of that. But again, the business of MAPA it's very hard to forecast. Well, you're one vote. Yeah. And so, yeah, and I mean, but again, like with cash reserves, I mean, that is wholly within the discretion of the board, and that's why we set it up, is because at the end of the day, those are member contributions to MAPA's mission. And so, you know, having a cash reserve again is new. That's why we wanted to have that structure, and provide a little bit of oversight to that.
Excellent.
Okay, and then the final page here, program budget, I guess there's two pages, but the program budget here, this is a restatement of everything you've seen prior, showing those in the categories that reflect our financial statements that are presented through the audit, and then two pie charts, which I'm not going to dwell on, but you can see that, you know, year over year, largely kind of the execution for FY 2025, and the various categories of our expenses versus our revenues, they align with the funding numbers that you've seen above.
And just to remind the board, you didn't have these pie charts before, Greg Yule, who right before he left said, Matt, I want pie charts for our budget. So I said, fine, make the pie charts. So we got the pie charts. Then he leaves, we still have the pie charts. So if you want the pie charts, that's fine. They're not that hard to update, but I'm not a big fan of pie charts. Can you tell?
Elected officials like budgets.
I think that was Greg's point.
It's simple.
It's pretty easy to read, and to be
Yes.
honest, I looked, you know, I just like back when I used to read a book for English, I went right to the back cover. And looked at those, and it just sticks out, it is easy to read.
Well, for people that probably can explain the difference for pages.
I know, but Matt didn't go to college.
No.
I get it.
I just have a pet peeve with pie charts.
It shows up in our annual report.
It should be pretty easy to do.
Yeah, that's it.
All right.
Oh,
Yes, please.
I'm sure I was probably here last year, but just as a second, we're familiar with processes. You're bringing us the 2024 amended budget. Procedurally, how often do you bring us an amended budget to the current year? And then will we see another one this year, or is this around the time that we normally get it?
That's a great question. In general, typically MAPA has done one budget revision a year for our full agency budget. And that's typically right around this time of year. And that's part of our budget schedule, which we don't have in the packet here today. But that is really to, again, as Matt noted, align what activities are going to be occurring through June 30th, what's going to be kind of a continuation beyond that, and really trying to reconcile till the end of year and trying to get that best estimate of where we're going to end up, what needs to be carried forward and reflected. On the Unified Planning Work Program, sometimes we have more than one revision during a year if we, you know, exceed 10% on kind of the total work program execution, or we need to adjust a line item, or a new project comes in, a new grant award, things like that. But in general, I would say there's 1 to 2 of these a year, kind of on a maximum. But for the budget, normally, because our budget doesn't require us before we exceed line items, we're not, you know, by Q4, we haven't exceeded many of those line items. And so this end of year adjustment gives us a way of really kind of reconciling that and really figuring out where we're going to be going forward after July 1. That's a great question.
Our administrative procedures require us to get board approval if any one of our line items exceeds $1,000 more. So that's a little, we're trying to change the administrative procedures, but those of course are actually harder to change than a budget. So we're trying to make them a little bit more reasonable to administer. So we'll be going through a revision of administrative procedures, but right now that's the rule. So if that were to happen and I were to see that, and with our new accounting system, we'll probably see budget in real time. So once I know it, then I have to report it. And if I have to report it, then we may have to do a budget revision. It could just be a simple line item action, you know, to change this line item or something like that. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But
and those administrative policies, when we went into the ERP implementation, that was something that kind of hand in hand with that. Once we have kind of new workflows and things that were set up, come back to the board and say, what are the opportunities to streamline this process? What does the board need vision on? What does the finance committee need vision on? All of that.
So if you've crossed that $1,000 threshold, you got to make a amendment to the budget. What if a month later, the next project that comes out of that activity funds is $1,000 short or
right,
savings?
again,
So,
According to the admin procedure.
so who set these administrative
Right.
laws?
People in the eighties, they're old.
Whoever they are, they're long gone.
Elected officials, Pat?
No, I think it was MAPA
It
staff.
was the MAPA board, they're approved by the.
I think that's gotta get
Yeah.
looked at, because that, I can see where that would cause a lot of additional work for staff, it's like, cause really, at least me, I care about the bottom line, the number at the end of the year. Did you make budget, were you extremely over? That's what I'm concerned with, not,
So is
$1,000
that
every
basically
week.
changing the bylaws? Is that what we need to do?
is that,
It's administrative procedure.
Well, they're the equivalent of our bylaws, so
Right.
the board has to approve the change.
And it has like all the contracting thresholds and things like that, you know, and so I mean.
There's a lot of stuff that needs to be.
and I know you guys are extremely busy, and maybe it's not a priority today, but I would think that the board would be, willing to at least take a look at any changes that you brought to us and stuff, so. To make it more streamlined and to save you time eventually.
Yeah, and that's gonna be an ongoing conversation. We started to dive into it, I think, last fiscal year. Right before the benefits renewal kind of threw us into a whirlwind and then the ERP implementation. So it's definitely on the list of things, but it's, it'll come to the board eventually.
There are some line items that are exceeding the 1,000 from the amended. They just haven't occurred yet. We're still got a little bit over a month. By the time this went to print, we were 2 months back. Well, it takes us 2 months in our current accounting system to be able to reconcile whether we've broken a budget line.
Okay.
So, and we still have 2 months more before we actually break them. So you'll see like the travel budget, we had to plus that up because we will exceed that if we don't by the end of the year. So, so we are doing it. We're sort of just, the way we do this amendment, this one time a year amendment, you know, in May, based on numbers that we knew, you know, around April. So as of April, we hadn't broken the budget. We probably have by now, but I can't give you those numbers, right? Because I'm 2 months behind on my current system. So we're safe here because what you don't know, you can't report, so.
Okay. So,
Action on IMB.
with that, I'd like to take a motion to approve action 6B, number 1 and 2, with the amendment. And you wanna give me that dollar figure again?
Right.
2025?
To allow for an adjustment to the budget
9,000.
of 9,873. And its subsequent impacts due to a change in FTA 5305 funding.
So that's like,
Second.
any further discussion? Liz?
Belt.
Aye.
Burmeister.
Yes.
Friend.
Yes.
Height.
Yes.
Rhodes.
Yes.
Morrison. Yes. Benton. Yes. Kendick.
Yes. Any members wish to discuss something? I think we have a few of you, give you an eagle eye to say yes to this. Getting kind of late, so Andy, I caught a couple of them from. I'm gonna get you back to start.
Right, I'm sorry.
I did it. Is there any additional business? If not, this meeting is adjourned. Everybody have a safe trip.
Have a good Memorial weekend.